It's 4:20 and we're still in lockdown? It's giving me anxiety already. No, wait, don't smoke that. Now, with the lockdown, cannabis is scarce. So instead of smoking it, you might want to try making some edibles. On this episode of Grace's Place, we're making space cookies. What do I know about edibles? Well, I wrote a whole book on it, so I know a little bit. My book's available on Amazon. It's called Verde Cooks. The link is in the description. So, on to making some cookies. So if you're not into cannabis, you can make this recipe with whatever you want. Even plain butter and plain coconut oil. I'm using CBD butter. Make sure you're in compliance with your laws. I will take responsibility for anything you're doing. So you can't talk about cookies without talking about the creaming method. The creaming method is used for pretty much all your favorite cookies, probably. Chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, any type of drop cookie really, and most of the slice and bake. And it's also used for some cakes too, like pound cake. So creaming refers to the sugar crystals cutting air into the fats. In this case, it would be the butter and the coconut oil. Once the air bubbles are in there, the sugar is going to start to dissolve into the fats. And you're going to be left with kind of like a buttercream. Once you start seeing that, you want to make sure you scrape down top to bottom, because remember, the mixer doesn't mix top to bottom. It only mixes around the bowl. Step 2. You're going to want to add your eggs and your flavorings. We're not talking about dry flavorings like cinnamon or nutmeg. We're talking about like vanilla, peppermint oil, maybe some alcohol, other alcohols you might want to add. In this case, I added peppermint oil because peppermint is a cousin to cannabis and it helps mellow out the flavor a little bit. Make sure you add your eggs slowly so you can create a good emulsification. If your eggs start to seize up your butter, that's okay. You're gonna lose some air in your dough, but you can still rely on the baking powder and the baking soda to make your dough rise. So it'll be a little more dense, but it's nothing to cry over. They'll still taste great. Okay, so step 3 is adding all your dry ingredients. You could sift your dry ingredients. I was too lazy, so I didn't. If you're making a cake, you might want to. It helps incorporate air. So maybe if your butter seized up, you might want to incorporate some more air. But for the most part, I just run a fork through it so I can just combine all the ingredients together. But I don't sift my ingredients generally for cookies. You're going to want to add your dry ingredients in a few parts because you don't want all that flour to hit you in the face. Another thing is you want to make sure you start your mixer on the lowest setting and you keep your hand on the power because you might have to turn it off really quick. So once I usually do a third or halves. So in this case, I just did half and half because it's a smaller batch. But if you're doing a bigger batch, you might want to do thirds. So once it's about 80% mixed in, you can go in ahead and add the other portion. When you're mixing your dough, you want to make sure you're scraping down your bowl, especially with dry ingredients. You'll see that it really doesn't get to the bottom, so you have to make sure you're mixing top to bottom. once your dry ingredients are in, this is when you're gonna add your chips or your nuts or your mix-ins. Then you're done. So once your dough is done, you gotta let it chill. You're gonna notice this batter is very loose because we're using oil in it. So this really needs to rest in the refrigerator before you scoop it out. I actually let mine rest overnight, so I did it the next day. But you wanna give it at least half an hour to set up. So we made the dough, you had it in the fridge for half an hour, and now you're ready to bake some cookies. Hold up. We have to talk about portion control. No, I'm not calling you fat. When you're making cannabis-infused cookies, you have to think about what kind of cannabis are you using? Is it CBD? Is it not CBD? You gotta portion it accordingly. So make sure you have a scoop that is gonna give you the same exact portions every cookie. I'm using a 1 ounce scoop, but that 1 ounce is not based on the density of my cookie dough. So I wanna make sure when I'm using a 1 ounce scoop that my cookie is actually gonna weigh 1 ounce. In order to do that, I'm gonna scoop out a cookie and then I'm gonna weigh it on a scale, and then I'll know how much it weighs. Do I need a little more? Do I need a little less? You're just gonna have to figure it out. I like to scoop my cookies out and put them on a sheet tray next to each other. This allows me to freeze them, and then when I want a cookie, I can just take it out of the freezer and pop it in the oven, and I have fresh baked cookies all the time. If you don't want to do that, you can bake them off on a cookie sheet like you normally would. Just make sure the dough is cold so it doesn't spread out too much. If you ever had a cookie that looked like a pancake, it's because the dough was too warm before it went into the oven. You also want to make sure your oven is preheated before you put the cookies into the oven. A standard oven, you're going to preheat to 350. A convection oven, you preheat to 325. You're going to bake them off for 8 to 10 minutes. Make sure you turn them in between. You want to turn them in between because ovens have hot and cold spots, so you want to make sure that your cookies are cooking evenly. After that, you can take them out and enjoy them there, or you can go a step further and turn them into flying saucers. To make a flying saucer, you're going to get your favorite icing, put it in the middle, and then roll sprinkles around the outside, and that finishes the space cookie. Now you can blast off into space. Do, 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 do.